Should we not therefore go back to the 7th century and check out what actually happened? Now, any historian should do the same. That's the historical work. That's the historical task. And that's what we're going to do today. Because I don't trust that 9th century and 10th century material. I want to see exactly what happened in the 7th century. So, what do they find? Now, just before we do that, I just want to put this map up there to show you what we're looking at. By 661, all the material, all that area in brown was under Arab control. I have Islam there in quotes because we're going to find out that this is not even the right name. But we'll get to that. Use Arab for now, Arab control. And the people we're going to go to, the scholars that we're going to look at are these scholars. These are the ones now are part of this new revisionist school coming out of our Western universities. Men like Dr. John Wansbrough in Britain, head of School of Oriental and African Studies for many years. And he is the one that blew this whole area open in the 1970s by writing 2 books. He wrote Quranic Studies and Sectarian Milieu. If you want to read 2 books that really impact you, read those 2 books. You can get them up online. I've got them on PDF if you want them on my computer. I can give them to you tonight even. Dr. Hawting is the man that I studied under in 1994 when I was introduced to this material. So we're talking about over 20 years ago when I first heard about it. And I studied there at School of Oriental and African Studies, and I heard all this material being impacted. There were about 50 people in our class. Within 2 weeks, all the 20 Muslims that were in our class left the class. And most of them slammed the door as they were leaving because they could not take this material. And all Hawting was doing was just presenting what others had researched. People like Dr. Wansbrough and particularly Dr. Patricia Corona. Dr. Patricia Corona should have 2 dots over the O, is from Denmark. She did her study under Wansbrough. She probably has done more damage to Islam than any other woman I know. And all she did was ask historical questions. Now, she was head of department at Oxford University when I got to know her, and then she got a death threat for writing Meccan Trade and the Rise of Islam in 1987. She had to move then to Cambridge University, and she became my supervisor there. She is now at Princeton University today, and I would suggest that she is probably the foremost scholar in this material. She reads and writes 15 languages. How many of you can read and write 15 archaic languages? Most of them are lost languages. That's why she's so dangerous. Because she goes back to the original material. She goes back and takes the original material. Dr. Andrew Rippon is a Canadian Orientalist who has taken a lot of this material and is probably writing the best book that helps you as lay people to understand, called Islam, their religion and belief. Dr. Robert Hoyland was another one of my supervisors at Oxford University. He reads and writes 18 languages. And he has probably been the best at looking and seeing what was going on in the 7th century around this period when supposedly Islam was coming to its fruition. Dr. Yehuda Nouveau out of the Jerusalem University in Israel has done the best work at looking at all the earliest Arabic inscriptions from the 7th century. And then the German school, Dr. Luning, Dr. Gerpwin, Dr. von Bothmer, and Dr. Oleg are probably the best scholars today looking at the earliest manuscripts. And they're the ones that have been responsible not only for the Syriac material that's coming out. Much of the Quran is based on Syriac writings. And then, of course, the manuscript evidence that we're going to talk about a little later, the Sana manuscript especially. But there have been 2 books that have come out in England in the last few years that have probably have been probably the most influential. Dr. Robert Hoyland, how many of you know, Dr. Tom Holland, how many of you know this name? Okay, he's from Britain. He has written 3 bestsellers, Rubicon, The Fall of the Roman Empire, Millennium, The Fall of the Byzantine Empire, and Persian Fire, The Fall of the Persian Empire. Now, this is the man that's best fit to write the next chapter, because he writes about the 2 great empires, the Sassanid and the Byzantine empires, that were impacted by Islam. In fact, it was because of Islam that these 2 empires fell in the 7th century. And that's why in 2006, he started to write about Islam. And we told him that when he was going to do that, that he's not going to find much to write about. Just be prepared. It took him 6 years to write his book, In the Shadow of the Sword. Came out in 2012. Brilliant book. You just need to read the first 100 pages, then go to page 300 and read the last 100. If you want, that's really where all the material is that you need to read. He came out with a documentary that was filmed on Channel 4 television there in England in August 28th, 2012, which is a 90-minute documentary. I've got it on my computer here. If any of you want it, I can give it to you today. Look at that documentary. It summarizes what the book says. But he's very careful not to come to any conclusions. He just puts the material up there. He has a Muslim scholar from the United States come up and give his impression of everything that he's seeing. Absolutely hopeless impressions. At one point says, who cares? We have 2 billion people. They're not going to believe this anyways. So who cares if this is what you're finding? What kind of defense is that as a historian? Now, that was filmed only once on Channel 4 television in Britain. They wanted to film it again in November. There was such an outcry by the Muslim community in Britain, they never filmed it a second. They've never shown it a second time. So you can see it yourself. We'll let you watch it. But the book that I think is going to be much more of an impact is this book here, Quranic Geography. How many of you know about this book? Have you read it? Please do read it. I'm going to show you why. This book is probably going to do more damage than any other one book. Dr. Dan Gibson is from Canada. He spent 20 years researching this book, spent and lived there amongst the Bedouin, there in the Middle East. Got to know them intimately and went all over the Middle East trying to find out these geographical locations that are in the Quran. We're going to unpack that a little bit in a while. Hold on to that. This book, I think, is going to do more damage than any other. And you'll see why once we unpack it. But here's their concerns. And this is the problem right here. Just take a look at these phrases that I have, these bullet points that I have. The first Arab inscription referencing Muhammad. Do you notice I'm using the word Arabic? The first Arab inscription referencing the name Muhammad is not till 691. Muhammad died in 632. The first reference to Muslims. Now, they do not call themselves Muslims. That's the problem. Nowhere can we find any reference to people called Muslims until the 690s. For 60 years, they used the name Saracen. They call themselves Hagarines, which means from the line of Hagar. They call themselves Ishmaelites, again from the line of Hagar through Ishmael. They call themselves Maghrib, which means from the Maghreb, which is the area they come from. And they use the word Muhajirun to refer to themselves. Because these people are conquering, and they are moving into the vacuum that existed there in the Sassanid Empire, and they're taking over Basra and Baghdad. They then go up and take over Damascus, Jerusalem, and Cairo. They are conquering these people, but they don't call themselves Muslims. That's the problem. And there's no religion called Islam. There's no reference anywhere to Islam until Abd al-Malik. It's Abd al-Malik in 691 and 692 that introduces those names. We can't find any documentation earlier than that date. Now, why haven't we heard this before? The first reference to the word Islam itself is on the Dome of the Rock, which was built in 691 by Abd al-Malik as the greatest structure of its day in contradistinction to the Byzantine power. And you can see it is Abd al-Malik that creates this Arab identity. And in order to create this Arab identity, he has to have a place that's bigger than any other, and that's why he builds the Dome of the Rock. But take a look at the only original part of the Dome of the Rock that still exists today. It's been destroyed and rebuilt 11 times. You need to go to the inner ambulatory and read the Arabic inscriptions along those inner ambulatory, and they are all against Jesus Christ. They're against our Lord. Islam, in its very nascence, was a rebellion against the divinity of Jesus Christ. Say not three, for God is one, and he has no partners. That's Surah 4, Ayah 171. That comes straight out of the Quran. That's on the Dome of the Rock. Reference after reference attacking this person called Isa. Now that's fascinating, because there's nothing that speaks about why that building was built. Muslims say that building was built to commemorate the Miraj. Remember I talked about the Miraj earlier, when Muhammad went up to the 7 heavens, right there on that rock, and met Allah and met Moses, bounced back and forth between, and got 50 prayers down to 5 prayers. That's called the Miraj. That's why that building was built. Take a look at any of the inscriptions and find any reference to the Miraj. You won't find any reference. What's more, the Dome of the Rock doesn't have a Qibla. Ooh, hold on a minute. I'm going to actually contradict myself in about 10 minutes. Hold on to that. You'll see why. There is no Qibla in the Dome of the Rock. Yet this is the third most holy shrine in Islam today, built in 691 by Abd al-Malik. But here's the real clincher, and this is the one that really hurts Muslims. There is no reference to a city called Mecca until 741. We can't find any reference. Patricia Crono is the first one to find this out. We'll get into that a little bit later. 741, no reference anywhere to a city called Mecca. Now remember, Mecca is pretty important for Islam. Mecca is where Adam and Eve were sent to in Surah 7, ayah 24. When they were sent down from the Garden of Eden, they were sent down to Mecca according to the traditions. Mecca is where Abraham and Ishmael rebuilt the Kaaba in the 1900 BC. Mecca is a center of trade, north, south, east, and west. It is where Muhammad was born. It is where he grew up. It is where the Kaaba has always been. It's the center of the earth. You've got a problem if there's no reference to it until 741. Muhammad died in 632. You do your maths. Are you following what I'm saying? The first biography, as you already know, the first biography we even hear about this man Muhammad is not till the 9th century, 833. Now, let's start with the geography. Let's unpack this and show you what we're talking about. When you look at the Quran, you will find that there are 65 references to geographical locations in the Quran. This is what Dr. Dan Gibson has pointed out. Over and over again, you find references, especially 3 places, 3 people, the people of Ad, which is the biblical Uz. The people of Thamud. 23 times it refers to the people of Ad. And that this prophet, but it doesn't name who this prophet is. It just says this prophet living at that place, the place of the prophet, the settlement of the prophet. It doesn't give a name to where this prophet comes from. If you look in the Quran, you will find Muhammad's name is only found 4 times. That should be troubling in and of itself. How many times is Issa's name found in the Quran? Anybody know? 93 times. Who do you think is more important, Jesus or Muhammad? If you're just going to look at numbers. But we're not going to just look at numbers. But it certainly does talk about a prophet. But where does he live? You will only find 1 reference to Mecca in the entire Quran, and that's in Surah 48, ayah 24. But it does talk about that this prophet has contact with these people from Ad 23 times, these people from Thamud 24 times, these people from Midian 7 times. So it seems pretty important that these people are living right around where this prophet lives. But take a look and see where Ad, Midian, and Thamud are. Look at the map. They're up in Jordan, 600 miles further north. Mecca's way down here. I wish I had a pointer. Can you see where Mecca is on the map? There's Ad, Thamud, and Midian, and here's Mecca way down here. It's 600 miles off key, further north. You've got a problem here. What's more, Mecca is only referred to once, Surah 48, ayah 4, and there you see, it doesn't really say much. The valley of Mecca, after he made his voices, so it's in a valley. We do some more things about Mecca. We're told also that there's little vegetation there. We find that it's in a valley, that this place where the prophet lives, remember, it's not Mecca itself, it's just saying where the prophet lives, has a stream going through it, has a parallel valley. It has a pillar of salt, that the prophet goes out in the morning, passes this pillar of salt, which would be the wife of Lot, who's turned to salt, and then comes back in the evening, passing this pillar of salt again. So it's pretty close to where this prophet lives, if he can go back walking and coming back walking, passing it, right? That it has fields, trees, grass, clay, loam. It has olive trees, and here's the clincher. This place has olive trees. That has a mountain overlooking the Kaaba. That's that square building. But take a look at Mecca. It is not in a valley. There is no parallel valley. There is no stream going through Mecca. It doesn't even have water. It only has 1 well, the Zamzam well, which cannot even accommodate the caravans supposedly that went there. There is no clay, grass, loam. There is no stream at all. And certainly there are no olive trees. There are no olive trees in all of Arabia. The only olive trees you will find are in the Mediterranean, 600 miles further north. Ooh, I love this. You'll see why this becomes even more damaging. Now, what do the traditions tell us? Well, the traditions tell us that Mecca is a center of Islam, that it is also appointed for mankind, was that at Bakka. But is that Mecca? Bakka and Mecca. How many people speak Arabic here or read and write Arabic? Okay, none here. If you look at the Arabic, you have 3 consonants for every word. Bakaka would be the form for Becca. Makaka would be the 3 consonantal form for Mecca. Completely different consonantal form. You cannot appropriate one with the other. It's a totally different word. And that's why Muslims are confused. And the only Muslims that argue this are ones that don't speak Arabic. It's the mother of all settlements. We know wherever this prophet comes from. Yet, the only reference we find is in Surah 48, ayah 22. So, did Muhammad come from here? That's what we're asking. And is it the center of the Qibla? We're going to come to that. Let's just take a look at a map from the 7th century.